are going to talk about a very serious subject today, and I am very grateful that your church is aware of it, that you're choosing to be aware of it. I'm going to answer as many questions as I can as we go. We're going to talk about some disturbing things. Now, some people find what I'm going to present a little disturbing. I am not going to show you gory pictures, so you don't have to worry about that. We are going to talk about some very practical issues in the ministry and in church service and some practical threats that Christians have to deal with. And we're going to teach the concepts, which I'd like you to adopt as your own so that you know how to defend yourself in a real-life situation. And if time permits and you're willing, we'll take some walks around a little bit and talk about some different spaces in the church just to give you an idea of how those concepts would work in different spaces. So a little bit about Standing Stone. We are a Christian company. We do schools and apartment complexes and stadiums, and we've done somewhere around 1,400 security plans for schools and universities. We've done thousands of emergency response plans, literally thousands of them. We've trained police departments from coast to coast. A lot of us were in law enforcement. Almost all of the top leadership have been involved in violence, either as a victim or responding to violence or having to neutralize violence. So this kind of thing is very personal to us. There is a way to minister through this type of situation that we will talk about as we go through here, because there's some things to think about. It's also important to know, and one of the advantages we have as Christians is God's in charge. He's just in charge. He's in charge of what happens with my wife. He's in charge of what happens with me on my way home. He's in charge of what happens at every moment of every part of our life. You have to believe that if you want to be successful in emergency management. People who don't believe that tend to have a very hard time. You should see that the secular stress that happens when people believe life is worthless or doesn't have value, and they're trying to save lives. They feel that a great injustice has been done. Why did we get shot up? Well, I don't actually know the answer why somebody got shot up. I don't. But I do know that God has a plan. If you don't believe that, it's very hard to survive this type of incident. It's very hard to survive this without being honest, that we might be a little afraid of some of these things. Sometimes I'll run into some folks that say, I really don't think I would do bad in a gunfight. And I say, have you ever been in one? They say, no, then you don't know that, right? Because it's scary. You know, it's scary. Sometimes it's scary afterwards. It's a very strange thing. Violence is a very strange thing that way. Sometimes it's scary before it happens, then it's not, and then it is after. Can't explain it to you. We're designed that way. Deal with what's in front of us. I can tell you that 99.9% of people, if they believe and follow their concepts, can take life-saving action in any situation. And I will guarantee you took a life-saving action today. You may not even be aware of it. How many people, well, if you may not want to admit to this, how many people did not wear their seatbelt today? One person, a couple people, right? How many people did? The first life-saving action you took, right? Most people will do that. How many people lock their house door? That's a life-saving action as well. Being prepared with something as simple as a seatbelt, locking a door. You do this all the time. You make these decisions, and you're going to recognize it. When we go through this, we're going to do something called tactical thinking, teach you how to think tactically. Same thing we teach special forces, same thing we teach police, and to teach you how those decisions are made. And that's the key, is a process to saving your life and other people's lives in an emergency. It's really important that we obey the process. Sometimes we try to will something to happen the way we want it to happen. It's not going to work, all right? There's only one in charge. We have a process that has been given to us. You will see it in the Bible over and over again, and as we go through it, I'll kind of explain that a little bit. We'll give you some examples. I won't belabor a lot of biblical points, but I think you'll find that you can see them all over the Bible. In fact, salvation itself will lend itself to what we're going to talk about here, or the other way around, I should say. So I have up there from the King James Version, he will not suffer thy foot to be moved. Excuse me. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. And I like to put that kind of abridged version up there simply because God is not asleep at the wheel. You know, when I've been in life and death situations, there's part of me that felt completely alone. The truth is that was self-centered thinking, because as I've grown from that, I've realized in other dangerous situations, he wasn't asleep. He simply wasn't asleep. He was still there. Things still happen. I'm still here, right? That's proof one, right? I'm still here. But even if I wasn't, he's still there. And that's important to talk about. We just have to think about that a little bit. I want you to bury that in your heart as we go through, is God is here even in the worst of times. He was at the worst of times before we were, if you know what I mean. And it's really important that our spirituality and our defense of our church are linked together. And there's a right way and there is a wrong way to defend a church. What I mean by that is there's the right spirit in which you do it and the wrong spirit in which you do it. I'm going to give you the technical way, the earthly technical way. I'm going to show you that. But you can do it out of fear, or you can do it out of love. In the secular world, we tend to fight against things we hate. That's what evil tends to do. It fights against things it hates. It hates God, so it fights against God. It hates you because you love God, so it fights against you. It's not how God works. God fights for things he loves. Hence salvation. He didn't have to do that. He didn't have to save us. He didn't have to do any of that. He's God. He chose to go to the cross. He chose that because he loves us. Same attitude will help you in a real fight. I'm looking to defend what we love, our church, our children, our people, God's people. Now, can God do it without us? Sure. But he invites us to join him, or he may do it without us. You have no idea what threat God has decided is not coming here. I have no idea. There could have been somebody on the highway that wanted to shoot up this church, and God drove them off the highway. I have no idea. I mean, I don't have any proof of that, but God saves us all the time. God finds our car keys. Anybody ever asked God to help them find their car keys? Yeah, I have. I absolutely have. And you know what? He's helped me find the car keys. It's sort of like there's an old joke that my pastor tells that, we only need God when it's an emergency. So this guy's driving through a parking lot, and he's late for work. He can't find any place to park. And he says, Lord, if you just open up a parking spot close to work, I will go to church on Sunday. I don't want to get fired. I'll do all these wonderful things. And then a car backs out at the perfect spot, and he goes, never mind, God, I found one. Right? Right. Well, don't be like that with safety. Right? Safety comes from God. Right? We have a part to play in it. We minister towards safety, and we point towards Christ. Does that make sense to everybody? That's the key. So we want to keep it in the right spirit. Okay. Excuse me. So, when Jesus was with his team and they were crossing the water, their big storm came up and threatened them all. They were afraid. They were scared. So how could you possibly go to sleep? Well, he's God, right? So he was in control. He already knew about it. The same thing happens to us in emergencies. We start to talk about what we can do, not what God can do. And so I don't think I can fight back. That's not true. That's not true. You can. I'm going to show you how you can fight back no matter how old you are. And fighting back might be barricading a door and going out a window. That's fighting back. We want to defeat the situation, not the person. We may defeat the person. We're going to talk about violence later and how to use it. I know, we don't normally say that in church, right? But we are going to talk a little bit about violence and what happens when we have to use it. My point is, it's not about what we can do, it's about what he can do, and he chooses to do it through us. Wonderful. If he chooses to do it for us, wonderful, right? It's really important that we get ourselves out of the way. One of the things that we find scientifically that dovetails with the way God does things, which I love to point out to my secular friends, it's like, wow, God designed that. And they're like, well, I'm just curious. So then I show them different parts in the Bible where this is true. If we get in our mind that I'm responsible for saving everybody, you will perform poorly. You will perform very poorly. Because that is a selfish mentality. If I get in my mind that I'm going to serve everybody by taking protective action and I'm going to do what's necessary to serve people and to protect them, you're going to do really well. We've done studies on this over and over again, And it turns out that people who focus on their idea of serving others and for the good of others do really well versus the people who say, I am the linchpin in all things safe. You can see why. If your plan's not working, is your pride going to make you stick to that plan or adapt? That's a problem. If your pride's going to make you stick to a plan that's not working, that's a real problem. If it's about service, you're going to adapt, improvise to protect others. It's not going to be about you. Does that make sense to everybody? So we find that in warfighting, we find that in law enforcement, emergency management, rescue, and we find it when people have to defend themselves against any type of disaster. You know, sometimes you'll run into parents who have a kid who's addicted. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And they want to control the addiction as opposed to do what they need to do to serve that person by holding them accountable, doing these other things. If it's about me, I'll make myself comfortable. If it's about them, I'll be uncomfortable in order to make an impact on the person I'm trying to save. Does that make sense? You know, if you don't like getting in the water, you probably shouldn't be a rescue swimmer, right? But you're going to get wet, and that's okay. It's not about us, it's about him, and because it's about him, it's about them. And that's the philosophy that we can prove that works most of the time, and that's the philosophy, the spiritual truth from the Bible that sometimes I have to remind my secular friends about. Because why do Christians do so well in emergencies? Good question. Why do? And we do, by the way. We do very well in emergencies. But it's that mentality, it's that spiritual thought, that purpose of service that allows us to set our mind to do very well. Now, other service organizations do well too. Your special forces and rescue people, things like that. So I'm just going to move forward here a little bit. I'd like us to make sure we understand our goals, and I promise we will take breaks, so don't worry. I want you to understand the threat in reasonable terms. There's unreasonable and reasonable. Unreasonable would be like, I feel like Iran is going to blow up my church because it's here at Shippensburg, and if they blow up this church, the entire country will fall. That's unreasonable. That's not a reasonable assumption. If this church disappeared, the country probably wouldn't fall. Unless we were at the end times, and, right? Right? Like, you never know, right? But my point being, there's reasonable and unreasonable. Some people feel that they have to take extreme measures to defend. Some people think that they have to take no measures to defend. Both are unreasonable. Would you actually, in some churches, they have a need for a sniper. I know a couple churches that have them, and there's some good reasons that they have them. Do you think that's a reasonable threat here? Probably not. Not based on the way it's set up in here. It's probably not a thing. We don't have a 100-yard lecture hall here, right? We don't have that type of stuff. We don't have 4,000 people coming in. Now, what's reasonable depends on the congregation and the situation. It's also an unreasonable position to say we need to do nothing. And that's a position that happens a lot. Well, it won't happen here. Well, that's not true. I'm going to show you the fact that that's not true. And I don't think any of us believe that. I think we know that wise people avoid all extremes. But we're also talking about an extreme subject. So within this extreme subject, and violence is extreme, violence in itself is fairly unreasonable unless it's violence in defense, right? It's a fairly unreasonable thing to come to anywhere in our society and just punch somebody. That's an unreasonable thing to do. It is not an unreasonable thing to do to punch somebody who's trying to hurt you or your children, or for the government to take out a foreign threat that wants to attack the United States. That is not unreasonable. Does that make sense to everybody? So I just want to kind of set the stage a little bit for us. I want to get you a level of comfort that you can make life-saving decisions in a crisis situation, and I promise you, you can. I cannot promise you the outcome will be 100% the way you want it to be. And that's really important. He's in charge. I am not in charge. But we can go through a process that allows us to make very good decisions that will lend us towards a more favorable outcome than a less favorable outcome. I would love to sugarcoat it and say that there's a chance that we will survive every incident. That would be a lie. I can tell you that statistically you're likely to survive if you take action. I can't promise it, but you are far more likely to survive if you take action than if you don't take action. We'll talk more about that as we go. Help you understand the process you need to go through to survive in a crisis, empower you with informed options. In emergency management, plans are important, options are everything. So you plan your options. We have a church, we have a service. Our main mission is to worship Christ, is to worship God, to be here for church, to do the things that our Lord requires. That's our main mission, right? It's not to secure the church, but it's not the absence of securing the church, right? So when we talk about that, empowered with options, we have a plan. Everybody will come through those doors. I'm making that up. It's not the real plan. I made this up. Let's pretend our plan is everybody comes through those doors, and we'll guard that door, and we'll be safe, but somebody comes through this door, right? What options do we have to defend the congregation? And that's important. Creating options. What options do I have if I'm a Sunday school worker, or if I'm in the coffee service? What options are available to me in this environment, and what options do I have to self-defense in this particular area? So planning the options and being able to identify options is what keeps people alive. In emergency management, we'll also often tell new emergency managers, make a really detailed plan, but have more options than you have planned. Because it's really important. The hurricane comes in, and we do hurricane rescue, a little bit about Standing Stone. We train law enforcement, we do hurricane rescue. I bring law enforcement from all over the country to hurricanes like you see in Jamaica. We coordinate that stuff. We do real world things. We even run 3 police departments. So, I mean, this is, we live and breathe this. So when I say this, I mean it seriously. If we have a good plan, it's important. We must have options to maintain the plan or deviate from the plan. Do you have the ability? Where would you run in an emergency? Do you have multiple places you might run? Again, options. You need options. And we're going to talk about that. It's easy to identify, and we'll show you how to develop options quickly. You'll get really good at it really fast. I promise you, you can do this. You absolutely can do this. But informed options and empowered options are really important. Does the person that's protecting the children know that they have the authority to act in a crisis? And here's the thing. 70% of people will, but guess what? 30% of people won't. You know, part of it is because, well, I don't know what the pastor wants me to do. That's a fair question. I mean, if you really think about it, this is going on, what do I do? What do you want me to do if this happens? People will take some type of action. At least 70% of us will. Somebody breaks in, people will do something. It might just be screaming. They might fight back. They might pass out. It can be that stressful. I know it sounds crazy, but people will pass out under high stress. We don't know their physical, maybe they have super high blood pressure. I have no idea. We don't know the physical condition of somebody in one of the spots that's serving in a ministry. And if they don't have empowered and informed options, panic can take over, and the devil will use that against them, and they will hurt you. It's like people who don't have a church. What do you do when your family's in crisis? Who do you go to? What options do you have? Parents will sit there and spin because they don't have options. Well, I can go to my pastor. I can do X, Y, and Z. There's people in the church body. The church body gives us options to turn to for help. Have you ever noticed that? There's a lot of options in the church body. There are people who will love you. There are people who will not like what you did, but they'll still love you, right? There are people in the church that will help you with options. And that option might be you need some discipline. You need some discipling. You know, like, this wasn't a good thing to do, you know, buddy. It's not where we're headed. Those things are really important. The same is true in an emergency. The other part of it is God's given us some natural instincts, including fear, and we want to translate them into life-saving actions or skills. So these natural instincts we have can lead you to sin, they can lead you to mistakes, or trained, they can lead you to life-saving behavior. I mean, God does this with us all the time. We learn the Word changes how we behave. It takes the instincts that we normally have, we subject them to the Spirit, and we get victory, and sometimes we fall and we have to start over, right? But it's really important, very important, that those natural instincts in an emergency are taught to work for us. And in Christ, we have new instincts. Like, one of the instincts that you can develop is love for others, right? It's a spiritual quality. It transcends the physical instinct. Physical instinct is that your body is going to flood you with adrenaline. It might make you angry. It might make you scared. It's looking at what options are available. Am I going to run? Boom. It's going to flood you full of energy to do that, hopefully. If everything's working okay, the system's going to come online. The system might come online to fight. I'm ready to throw some punches or pick up a chair or do whatever is necessary. Untrained instincts, though, it's like an unruly garden. You don't know what you're going to get. Having a plan that's in your mind, and the cognitive part of your mind, translates to the action that your body will take. We know that from studies. That's just the way God designed us. If you can tell I eat a lot of donuts. I call them police energy rings. Because I eat them, right? Well, they keep us going in the middle of the night. But because I eat that, I have the consequences. I'm a little heavy, right? Well, I can change my outlook on that, and I can eat differently, right? We have the ability to do that. We certainly have the ability to do that in Christ. Same is true with violence and when violence happens. Having a plan allows us to override blind fear and use those natural gifts of adrenaline to our advantage, and that is really important. If your heartbeat gets up above 140 beats per minute, you don't make good decisions. You have trouble reading, in fact, unless you're an athlete. Some athletes can do that. If they're well trained, some people can do that. But for those of us who aren't, if we're in a panic, that panic makes our decisions worse and worse and worse. We start thinking about what's going to go wrong. If I do this, oh no, I'm not sure if I should do that. Should I take this risk? We're going to eliminate that a little bit today. Because again, who's that about? It's about me, isn't it? It's about the consequences of taking action I don't want to face. But somebody has to take action. So do I lock a door and not let somebody in because I know there's a shooter in the hallway and I've got 10 little kids here, but my best friend's outside? Yeah, we got to think about that. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. But if I tell you, listen, in peacetime, if I tell you, listen, you look like a nice lady. You can lock me outside if necessary. I pre-forgive you. Well, in the middle of it, you're still not going to want to do it. But years later, after I'm dead, you're going to be like, well, he told me to do it. We decided beforehand that we're going to do what's right. It's very tough, guys. It's very tough. I hope you never have to make that decision. But it's much better to give each other preemptive forgiveness. None of us are going to want to leave somebody in the hallway if we can at all save somebody, right? But what if you can't? You're not committing a sin. The situation came to you. You're doing what the situation demanded. If you don't have a plan, you're going to open the door and boom, everybody's going to die. I mean, often that's the case. Now, some people won't open the door because they make that assessment and they just, this is what I'm going to do. But it's much better if we decide that as a group ahead of time. Okay, so we want to reduce fatalities and injuries. We put injuries up there because it's very important. How we decide to evacuate a building can get people broken legs, which can get them killed. They can get ankles can be injured. They can get cuts from breaking windows. They can bleed out from leaving, fleeing from violence, and that kind of kills the whole point of running away, doesn't it? We don't want to run away only to die. So we're going to run away in a way that gives us the highest chance of not getting injured, also allows us to deal with things. And you'll hear things like run, hide, fight out there in the industry. That's a fine way if your school or wherever you've been has done that. But running is not always the answer. Clearing is, and I'll explain that to you. But run, hide, fight, if you run into that, is a wonderful program. It gives you some great information. We're going to go beyond that. You're going to learn the next stages of that. You're going to learn how to be a little more careful than that. Okay. We want to provide some skills to handle the aftermath. Now, I'm going to lace that throughout the training because there is going to be an aftermath. It's something the pastor and the leadership and the congregation must consider. How are you going to evangelize after somebody's been killed? I can tell you one thing that doesn't work. I'm sorry that your wife died, but God had a plan. Right? The moment that you say that to somebody who's not maybe churched, I don't know how else to say that, they don't understand. Say that to somebody else in here, they may understand. Listen, God, they may cling to you. They may get it, right? So when and how matters. When and how really matters. Sometimes you need a little space, and then we can talk to people. The secular community is going to ask you questions. Reporters are going to come up to you. Why do you think this happened here? Is it because how you treat outsiders? Is it because you're Christian and you must be discriminatory? Now, if somebody has just died, you might hear some of these really insensitive questions. A lot of times reporters won't ask you that type of stuff, but some will. There are ones, and they've done it to me. They're like, well, somebody died in this incident. What happened? Some of them will do that. So it's important that we think about how we're going to answer some of those questions. Now, I'm not the pastor, so I can't teach you how to answer those questions in that sense, but I can tell you that Christ is the answer. And we wouldn't have shootings if people were saved. In theory. We have sin in this world. Even Christians have sin. But if we were all living God's way, if we could live God's way perfectly, if we could do that, there wouldn't be shootings. There wouldn't be crime. We live in a fallen world. We live in a sin-sick world, a world that's passing away. And we have to believe that. We have to understand that. We also have to know that God has a plan. Be prepared that the outside world doesn't understand that God has a plan. They just don't. And they may be grief-stricken. They may come here for answers because something happens down the street, and we need to be prepared to minister them under the leadership of your pastor. Just keep that in mind. When a shooting happens, people come to church. They come to church, they have questions. And these are tough questions to answer. They really are. But it is worth the study on how we can minister to people when they've been hurt, when something like this has happened. They're not going to have your level of understanding. It's also important that you don't blame the place. When that happens, you see where they tear down public schools after a shooting? And it makes them feel better. It's sort of symbolic, so they'll spend millions of dollars to do that. Danger in doing something like that is you're allowing the outside circumstances to control your ministry or to control you. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do something like that. Maybe something bad happens, you want to change the carpet. But that's a prayerful type of decision. It is don't be a place worshiper. Place worshiper is a form of idolatry, and I'm saying that as my personal experience with secular communities that have been in these situations. It's not about the place, it's about the spirits. It's about Him. And the reason I say that is that it helps you manage. If there was a shooting in the sanctuary, would we close the church? No, we wouldn't do that. The building didn't do anything wrong. You see what I mean? And the devil would love that. The devil would love that. Let's just shut the church. Something bad happened. God must not love us. That's what it'll look like. So just be cautious of that. I hope you don't have to make any of those decisions. Now, if the church is damaged and we have to rebuild, that's a whole different thing. I just want us to think about that a little bit as we move through. Because, we're not going to allow the world to determine the success of the church. It's in God's hands. We serve God, period. Does that make sense to everybody? Okie doke. All right, so I've talked a little bit. Does anybody need a break? Because I'm going to get into some of the meat of the program here in a minute. All right, we'll go on for a little bit. We're going to challenge what we think we know. And, perceptions versus actual facts. There's a saying in one of the recent debates, but it goes way back, that, you're entitled to your opinion, you're just not entitled to your own facts, right? So you can have an opinion, but facts are facts. The sun is bright. Our church is standing right here. Those are facts. We're all alive at the moment. That's a fact. So there are perceptions. There are perceptions of violence. There are sometimes TV perceptions. I had a teacher when I was teaching at a public school. I was teaching active shooter class. And he says to me, he goes, you know what I would do? I'd climb through the ceiling tile and I'd jump out on them. Okay. Who's serious? He goes, I could do it. I have a baseball bat in my class. Jump out. Maybe. Probably not. You know what happens if you come through a ceiling tile and a person has a gun? They shoot you. Right? That's what happens. He goes, well, we'd know where he is. Okay. But you're still dead, and you're not. And a dead rescuer saves no one, so don't do that. We're not going to take suction cups, go up the wall, and ninja our way across the beam and jump in. We're not doing that. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't take a baseball bat if a guy broke into a classroom and we swung that baseball bat and knocked him unconscious or killed him or whatever the case might be. Be prepared for that. We may end up killing somebody. Accept that. You didn't do it. Now, if somebody's on the ground and they've surrendered, you cannot kill them. We all know that, right? Right? Don't come to our church again, right? It's not how we evangelize, folks. That's not going to work, okay? So we are going to challenge some perceptions. All right. We're going to talk about active shooter incidents are on the rise. Are you sure? Maybe not. You'd be surprised how violent the culture has been for a very long time. We'll talk about it. There are some peaks and valleys. Active shooter incidents are a new thing. We'll talk about that. It's not going to happen here. I don't think any of us believe that, or we wouldn't be here today. We're different around here. That's one of my favorite. Boy, I hear that one a lot. You just don't understand us. We wouldn't do that. Okay? Would somebody else? I hear that a lot. Well, we're a good church. None of us in the church would do that. And I'll say to them, well, you ever have divorce in a church? Any families break up? Anybody involved in sin? Anybody not really saved who resents the church because it's holding them accountable? You ever have that? You ever have to counsel somebody who doesn't want to be counseled? You ever have somebody with mental problems? And the variable, they'll say, well, yeah, then it can happen. Are there guns in the community? Of course there are. Are there knives in the community? Of course there are. Of course those things can happen. That doesn't mean it will. It's just, it's hard for us to say that our churches are so pristine, and every so often I hear that they won't happen. Well, it may not happen inside the church, although that's possible. Certainly could happen from outside the church. There's lots of reasons it could happen. Look at the churches that have been shot up recently. So, the police will handle it. They will not. I'm just going to answer that one right now. Nope, that is not going to happen. That is a TV lie, and I'll explain why. It's not that they don't want to handle it. It's that they need enough time to get here, and you need to still be alive for them to save you. See what I mean? So we have to take the first life-saving action. We have to do some things to empower our local gunfighter to get here and save us, right? If I pick up my phone right now and say, I'm calling the police, and there's a shooter right there, what do you think's going to happen? Yeah, pow, right? Right? And that call's not going to go through. So I may have to hide in order to get that phone call out. I'm unarmed at the moment. I might have to get that phone call out. I may have to fight the person. I may not have time for a phone call. So the idea that the police will handle it is a misnomer. If they were standing right here, would the police handle it? Sure. Sure. Would they engage us? Absolutely. Absolutely. You have a trooper or local police officer here and somebody's pulling out a gun, of course they're going to engage that person. Of course they're going to take some action based on their training. Of course they are. But that doesn't mean they're going to be able to handle, and that's the key word, handle the situation. We're going to have to handle the situation by preparedness, responding appropriately, and handling the aftermath. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, good. All right. I will take them down, or I will, it says it twice, I will take them down or I'll take them down. And then we'll talk about having a carry permit. The pastors, ushers, and leaders will tell me what to do. That is not true. How are they going to do that? How would you do that? Right? They're going to tell us beforehand, maybe. Here's a plan, here's what we're trying to do, here's what we're trying to accomplish. But from the pulpit, how are they going to do that? Depends on where the incident is. Maybe they can give you some information, maybe they can't. So we have to make those decisions early. All right. So, moving forward, worst incident in the United States. Is anybody ever familiar with this? It was in 1927. A school board member blew up the school. Yeah, most people have never heard of this one. So, in 1927, during 3 bombings in Bath Township, Michigan, 45 people were killed, 58 others were injured due to these bombings. These bombings were planned by Andrew Keyhole. Andrew Keyhole was a school board member who voted to take his own house because he didn't pay his taxes, but blamed the school board. And he decided what he was going to do was get even with everybody. A lot of people will tell you, well, Columbine was the worst one. I hear that on the news all the time. It's not true. Anybody know of a recent one where, in a school where 45 people were killed? It happened. There was one worse in Canada. People don't know about that either. But it's important to understand that was back in 1927. So we sometimes question whether it's a new thing. Certainly isn't a new thing. What are the chances in the United States of experiencing a shooting in any given year? It's approximately 1 in 53,925. Tornadoes about 1 in 60. Now these statistics change year to year. This is from a couple of years ago. So when we talk about reasonable terms, do we plan for tornadoes in Pennsylvania? A little bit. We plan for storms. How about fires? Fires are about 1 in 20,000. We certainly plan for fires. We have fire exits and things like that. So it is a real possibility that it could happen. But it's not necessarily going to happen tomorrow, right? It could. If we take some precaution, our chances of that happening go way down. So some of our physical security things that you are doing, some of the planning that you're doing, those type of physical security features that you take expand those odds in your favor quite a bit. Somebody can't get through a locked door, they sometimes choose not to do it, or they're seen and they have no success. They can't get in, the police come. It's called time over response. We delayed them long enough for an appropriate response. Nobody gets hurt, the police deal with it. And that's actually a really good outcome if you have to have one, because we had good security, we locked the doors, our nurseries were locked, whatever that might be. I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just saying whatever it might be. Those few moments allowed us to respond. Maybe we responded by counterattacking. That could be it. However, it's important to know that planning matters, training matters, but it's not more essential than the gospel itself. There are people going to hell every day. Every day, that's happening. Every second, that's happening. So when you weigh the two, right, it's appropriate to plan, but keep it in context. If you have a church school, you have to do tornado drills in Pennsylvania. Let's look at some of the history. Knoxville, Tennessee, you can see that in 2008, the gunman, I have to get closer to my own screen. A gunman opens fire at a church during a youth performance, killing 2 people. You can also see that all the way down in 2005, it's happened. You can see a bunch of them. And I'll make this PowerPoint available if you want to go through them. There is a huge list. This is a small fraction. They go all the way back to the 1800s. They were having this problem in the 1800s. They had this problem in the Colosseum where people had broken in and stabbed multiple people inside of the Colosseum, right, in Rome. That's a long time ago. It's a long time ago. This is not necessarily new. Human decadence, human evil has been around since the fall. When people will say this is a new thing, no, the human spirit's been as wicked as it's always been, right? Unchecked, it gets worse and worse and worse, right? The behavior gets worse and worse, but the wickedness is in there. Look at Sodom and Gomorrah. It's in there. It's in our fallen state. It's important to understand that because people will say this is such a new thing. No, it isn't such a new thing. The more densely populated we are, the more times that happens, but it still happens in almost the same percentages. Do weapons make a difference? Yeah, they do. They do. You know, if I have an AK-47, it makes a difference compared to a 6-shooter. But it doesn't change the heart condition of man. Does that make sense? So we can't not take it seriously. We just have to understand that's part of our fallen state. This is an important one. I have a permit. I hear this all the time. A permit entitles you to do what? Does anybody know? Carry concealed, right? That doesn't impart skill. Well, I have a permit. Well, great. Do you practice? Well, I don't do that. But I have a permit. I have a vanity one. You ever see those vanity ones you can get? Well, a guy was arrested about 4 years ago on the other side of the state because he decided that he would use his vanity thing like a badge, and he shot somebody. Somebody took another parishioner's seat. I don't know why they had assigned seating in their church, but there was a cultural assigned seating. They wanted the guy to move. The guy got belligerent with them because he was offended. And one of the parishioners came over and moved the youth pastor out of the way. The youth pastor backed off, which is abdication under the law. Don't do that. Backed away. And this parishioner flashes their vanity badge, and the guy punched him. So he pulled out a gun and shot him twice. That is not a reasonable response to being punched, especially if you weren't, hurt that badly, which he was not. That is not a reasonable response to that force. He wasn't even part of the security team. They didn't really have a security team, they had ushers. Nothing wrong with ushers either, but the ushers weren't doing anything, and he decided he would get involved and do something. That's the danger with people who carry permits in some cases. Nothing wrong with it. I mean, I have one. I carry my gun. There's nothing wrong with carrying a gun. The thing is, a permit allows you to protect yourself. It does not authorize you to necessarily protect others in the same way that an Act 235 would. So if you arm your church, Act 235 is the program at the state that allows you to have 40 hours of lethal weapons training, and they teach you about protecting other people. And why that's important, if you're going to do something like this, if you decide to arm your church, is because if I'm the pastor and I say, you sit here, and you sit here, and I know you guys carry, I've just created a security force. And if you are to abdicate your protection to another person in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that person must be trained. If I say I'm going to protect you, I must be trained. That's why they do that. They're happy with you carrying it for your personal protection, and yes, if somebody was trying to kill somebody, you can protect somebody else. That is the law. You can do that. What you can't do is be the formal security and use a permit to arm yourself. Permit does not offer skill. That's why you go through a skill test at Act 235. They actually make you shoot some bullets down range and make sure you know the law. They want to make sure that if you're protecting other people, you're at least trained to this minimum standard. You may have more training than that. You know, troopers often will just be given an Act 235 because they have excessive training over 40 hours. They may have 180 hours in some cases. So just keep that in mind. Some people believe because they have a permit they can do security work. You can't. You cannot contract yourself. You cannot do that. Now, if you want to be unarmed security for the church, you can do that all day long. You don't need any particular training for that. I would suggest you get some, at least train on your own policies, but you can be unarmed security for the church without any consequences whatsoever at any time, as long as the church recognizes you as part of that ministry, or part of the ministry, I should say. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, so we got through that, and we can talk more about that later if you would like to, if you have questions about it. All right. The police will handle it. I think we kind of talked about it. We do a lot of church schools. That's why we have principal up there. We do a lot of public schools as well. The police will handle it. Well, we talked about that earlier, and I wanted to bring that up quickly because it's often an issue where people say, well, the police will take control of it. The pastor, some authority will tell me what to do. They may or may not have time to do any of that. So this is an important concept, and I will give you guys a break here soon. Every emergency is managed, it's not controlled, and that's really important. You know, it's really important for us to focus on that for a moment. There is nothing in an emergency response situation where you control anything. That's language that we use sometimes. We'll say the fire's 50% control. Okay, we all know what they mean when they say that. Technical truth is, it's managed. It's 50% managed. That's what it technically is. Now, am I pulling out blades of grass? Yes, but for a very important reason. Very important reason. I cannot control the outcome of an event. My boss once said to me, when I was young and I was in emergency management and people died and we were trying to get the ambulances there. It was very difficult. It was freezing rain. It was a slow roll to get them. Some people didn't make it. I'm heart-stricken at this point because we want to win, right? I know that's a terrible way to look at it, but there's lives on the line. I want them to be alive, and I want our crews to be perfect, and I want everything to go perfect. Wow, that's the devil's lie. We can manage things. My boss says to me, Ian, you're going to be brokenhearted. You think you can control the outcome. Go ahead, give it a shot. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You can't control whether the hoagie you get at Sheetz is going to be made the way you want it, right? You can simply put the input, right? It may come back with something different, right? I can't control the outcome, but I can manage my conduct in regards to the emergency. And that's really important. That'll save you in the aftermath, because if you manage yourself by a process, if you manage what you did to the best of your ability, circumstances are not your responsibility. I can't control that a tornado shows up out of the blue and hits the church. But I can respond well to it. I can manage it based on science. First rule in emergency management is sometimes people die. Second rule in emergency management is you can't change rule number 1. Third rule is remember you're not God. Very, very important. You will be brokenhearted if you think you can will one of these things to success. You can manage actions that give you an opportunity for great success. You can defeat a situation by managing your actions very well. But victory comes from the Lord, and so does safety. Your job is to commit to the process. Follow the process. Work the process. Keep making good decisions. Keep thinking. Keep moving. Stay alive. That's your goal. Your goal is to work the process. Okay. In order to be effective, we must manage our response, not the situation. I covered that. Life-saving decisions are made at the lowest level, not at a distance. This means you're going to make the first life-saving decision if you come into contact with it, or somebody else comes into contact with it. And I have a group of kiddos here, a group of elderly, or just some regular old church-going folks that's a mixed bag of old and young, right? I'm here. I hear what's happening. I need to take some action. I need to communicate. We are going to do some things to survive, depending on where I'm at. Shooting happens in the sanctuary, but I'm back there. I'm going to take some action. Maybe I'm going to leave. Maybe I'm going to take 10 people, and we're just going to go. Maybe we can't leave. So maybe we're going to go into sort of a lockdown type of thing and prepare to fight back. But I'm going to make some decisions very quickly with the information I've got, and we're going to teach you how to do that today. You will be able to do it, I promise. As long as you practice, you'll be able to do it, and it won't take you long. We're going to make immediate life-saving decisions. Just like if I put my helmet on when I ride a motorcycle, which some people don't like to do, that's a choice. That's a life-saving or not life-saving decision. Did I wear my vest? I told a detective the other day, he's like, I put my vest on the side because I don't like wearing it, and I'm not really in the action. I said, so you're parked at a sheet somewhere, and somebody comes up and shoots you, then what? They might hit you in the head, but they might only hit you in the chest, but you didn't wear your vest, so you couldn't get out and help anybody. He's like, I don't like that. Well, neither do I, so wear the vest, right? Wear the vest. We'd like you to be alive to save the rest of us. They are uncomfortable, and I know why they don't want to wear them. I get it, but it's important. So we make those life-saving decisions. More information may come later. So we're with a group of people, maybe we ran into the woods. That could be a very good life-saving decision. We'll talk about when and how to do that. I did that, and we regrouped somewhere. Maybe I don't even have a good regroup place, but I find a sheets, I tell them what's happened, I find something, I knock on somebody's door, I explain to them we just had this major incident, I get the communication out that this incident has happened, the people I'm with I've accounted for, we're safe at the moment, and some more information may come to me by law enforcement or someone else. But in the moment, I had to make some decisions. Nobody told me what to do. Now, if we could, we might tell everybody to go to lockdown, right? That's great information. There's a shooter here, and we're going to we start doing our lockdown procedures. But lockdown's the beginning, not the end of the story, and we'll talk about that. But you must be willing to make those decisions for you and yours, and that means the whole church. You have to make decisions for the whole church. It's very possible. I know this happened to a friend of mine once. It was a potential situation. It turned out not to be one. He's in a pew, and there's this little kid in the pew, and the mother had gone to the restroom, and the father was teaching a class. And they decided that there was a strange person, and they were going to go to a lockdown situation. Somebody said the person had a gun in the parking lot, and they went and started to do their thing, but nobody was here for this little kid. So now he took charge of that little kid. He's a police officer, but he took charge of that little kid, made sure he was in a safe spot. No one else was there to do it. Could that happen? Could that happen here? Could the parent not be with the kid and the kid be sitting in the sanctuary? That's a possibility. That could happen in any church. So parents need to know that we're going to take some action, and they need to know that we're going to protect their children. Parents who don't know that, oh no, there's a shooter in the parking lot. Where's my kid? What do? They run outside. Now they're dead, potentially. See what I mean? So we have to make sure that we pre-communicate a lot. And thankfully, it turned out to be nothing, just scary. Okay. Emergencies speak to you. I'm going to let that sit in for a moment. It's called crisis obedience. The emergency tells you how to survive. You need to obey it. Really important. You must respond to the emergency that happens to you. You do not own the emergency. I know it's terrible. You have to serve an emergency. It's a terrible thought. What do you mean? We're going to conquer this emergency. Not like that, you're not. You have to serve the emergency. The emergency tells you. Let me move out of the way. The emergency tells you what you need to do. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I like to linger here a little bit because this is what will save your life and make you perform very well in the next sections that we're going to do. I'm going to give you an example of it. Your daughter, we'll just use a daughter for right now. I have 3 beautiful daughters and 11 grandchildren, love them to death, and I hope this won't happen to them, but it can. We have broken world situations, and they've had their struggles. Who hasn't, right? Now, none of my daughters had this struggle, but let's say your daughter, who you love, or your son, becomes a drug addict. You know, listen to what the emergency is telling you. I'm addicted, I cannot control my behavior, and I get into trouble, and I'm going to kill myself. That's what it's telling you, right? What's the emergency telling you to do? Give them more drugs? That's not saying that. Keep them in the situation or her in the situation they're in? Is it saying that? Is the situation telling you to do that? No, it's not telling you to do that at all. Is there a risk that you might fracture your relationship with this child as you confront them? Sure is, isn't there? You going to confront them? Why? It's the only thing to do. Unless you want to be a party to your child's destruction, right? Now, how you confront them, the technique you use, the pastoral service, or whatever that is, you can talk about. Do you see what I mean? The emergency told us what to do. The parent didn't tell the emergency what to do. The parent must serve the situation they're in. The Lord's put you there. It's left to you. You must do it. See what I mean? It's a very important concept. I'll give you another example here. What's that saying? Drive ahead? Telling us to run? Absolutely. It's very clear. Get out. Find some shelter. Find some cover, concealment. Right? Communicate when it's safe and appropriate to do so. Prepare to counterattack. We're going to get into those in a few minutes. So, the emergencies tell us exactly what to do. You ever notice God does that? I mean, He doesn't necessarily send me an email. I don't get an email with, like, itemized instructions. But He does tell us, you know, Ian, if you go around getting drunk, that's probably not going to work well for you. Right? If I'm drinking bowls of mixed wine and I'm really looping it up and I'm in the town partying and driving drunk, that's probably not going to go so well. Believe in Christ or you're going to be separated from me forever and you're going to be in hell. It does tell us. The emergency tells us. It's not a surprise, right? It's not a surprise. But in fact, I think He gave us 10 bullet points, right? Remember Him first. You ever notice that they're all about Him first? The first 4 commands are all about Him, then how you treat other people. It's also love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength, and love others as yourself. He tells you exactly what you need to do for the emergent situation we're in this sin-sick world. It's exactly what to do. You start following that, you start making better decisions. Now, technique comes into it. You know, I'm not going to, you know, I have a sister-in-law who's in jail, and she's going to be released soon. Love her to death. But when she comes over for dinner, I'm probably not leaving any money out. Right? Does that mean I don't love her? No, it doesn't. It means I know her. Now, I care about her, and I want her to be successful. I'm hoping she'll come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. I'm hoping that will happen. And we're going to try really hard as a family to encourage that. But that's what I'm to do. I'm not guaranteed the outcome, right? Right. Okay, so the emergency tells us what to do. Let's run away, because that's a bad idea to drive forward. We're probably going to need to find some shelter. We may need some help. There's some series of things going through your head right now to manage that emergency, isn't there? Right? So you already know how. We're going to give you some vocabulary to make it easier. Let's take a look at the next one. Everybody watching? All right, here it goes. Yeah, that's shocking, isn't it? Let's go back for a second. Is that personal? I mean, you're personally at risk, but are you insulted by the storm? No. Does it have a desire to harm you? No, it's a thing. It's part of nature. You know, now if in those clouds it said, Ian, I'm going to get you, I'd be like, oh. Dear Lord, I don't understand, right? Like, well, now that's personal, right? It's time to go, like, right? So, it's not personal. Did you notice how you felt inside, that's a threat? You're like, whoa, that's a threat. Watch what your brain does. This is a God-given gift in the next one. So I want you to look at it like you're looking at it with fresh eyes. You're going to feel something different, or at least you should. Are you ready? Yeah, it feels different. It's almost more frightening. Yeah, it feels different. It's because we're emotional creatures. Dead is dead. The tornado is just as deadly. The thing about this is a person, this is an entity that can track you and is desiring to harm you. It becomes personal really quick. Really, really quick. So we're going to do an experiment, and I'm doing this experiment. I'm going to take it out of emergency management. I'm going to teach you the difference between reason and logic, and this is really important. This is one of these life-saving skills we're going to give to you today. That's frightening. Do you think his relationship with the rest of us is fractured? Yeah. I'm not inviting him to dinner under these circumstances, right? Right? After he goes to jail, I might pray for him, but in the moment, I'm really not feeling the love here, right? It's also scary. If it makes anyone feel better, no one was harmed in taking this picture. But it's weird, because like when you look at this picture, if I walk this way, it feels like he's following me. Any way I go, your mind's drawn to that. So I'm going to go back for a second to take the stress off. Do you notice how less stress you feel all of a sudden? Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting. They're both equally deadly. One feels personal. The other thing is one can adjust to come get you, right? The tornado has a wider range. You know, it could follow you state to state, but it's not really following you. So let's talk about the emotional side of humanity. So we have been given this one incredible gift. It's called reason. And we're going to learn what reason versus logic is. So I need 2 volunteers. Anybody want to volunteer? I'll just call on you. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I look for the person that looks the most afraid. No, I wouldn't be. Oh, come on. All right. I need another volunteer. You're going to have to talk a little loud, so come on up here. Just one more volunteer. Somebody who's friendly. This is easy. I will pick some. Come on up. We must be ready in season and out of season, right, Pastor? Have to give a cause for the hope that is in us. So just stand up here. This is really easy. So I'm going to walk back here, and I'm going to give you guys some instructions. This is really easy. But I think you'll find, I use this with teenagers all the time, because teenagers say the fair word. It's not fair. Define fair. It's really hard. Well, it's what? No, I don't know either. So, all right. So these 2 guys, they're good friends. They're walking down the street. I hope you're good friends, because we just decided you guys are. They're walking down the street, and all of a sudden, there's a $20 bill on the ground. One of them sees it, and they pick it up. Oh, he picks it up. He snags it. He points it out. Just like deer hunting, right? There's a deer. Boom, thanks. Right? So he takes it, right? Okay, now we're going to use some logic. We're going to do a logic experiment. I pop out of the woods. You don't shoot me. You're like, oh, who's that weird guy all dressed up for hunting? Like, this is urban camera. So I jump out, and I say to them, hey, you can keep the $20. It's mine. We're doing a social experiment. But there's one condition to it. Here's the condition. You, the guy who picked up the money, I don't know your name, sorry. Jamie picked up the money. He is going to make an offer to, your name? Ken. To Ken. Jamie's going to make an offer to Ken, and that offer is going to be whatever split that you think is logical, whatever you think is best, you make the decision. If Ken accepts it, you both get to keep the money. If Ken says, you know what, I don't like that offer, the deal's off the table, I get the money back. You get one shot to negotiate this out. So you got to make him your best offer. You can make it whatever you want.
I'm going to give you 50%. 50% sounds reasonable. We both stumbled across it at the same time, right? You just happened to reach it first. Right. Yeah, I think 50% is good. Okay.
All right, who thinks that was logical? Raise your hand. Yeah. It was not logical at all. That was an emotional decision. Would you like to know why? Logic dictates that you would say, hey, Ken, you're a logical man. I'm going to give you a penny. You take a penny's more than you had. You keep $19.99. That's pure logic. That's logic. Would that offend you? It would. It would offend me. I'd be like, you're greedy. Wow, I hope you're putting some of that in the plate. Like, you are greedy. Wow. So, that's emotional. How would you feel about making that offer, if the logical offer?
The one where I was given
a penny?
I would feel, why even bother giving a penny?
It's not worth it.
Yeah, it's not worth
See,
anything.
they did something that was better than logic. And he said it. It's reasonable. A reasonable person in the same situation, understanding that you know that if you offer him a penny, that could be an insult. Right? That storm's not insulting us, but the guy with the gun is, because it's emotional. See the correlation there? We're creatures of emotions. Emotions can save us or they'll get us killed. Very hard to be logical in these situations. So since we can't be logical as human beings completely, we can be reasonable. Now watch this. I'm going to borrow you guys for 2 more minutes. You guys are in a lockdown. Who wants to be outside the door? Who wants to be banging on the door to get in? Okay, he's banging on the door. You're inside. You've got a bunch of parishioners. You know that I'm right here and I have a gun. He's in the hallway. He's banging on the door. He's making lots of noise. Right? You know I'm right here. You got 10 or 12 people in there with you. And you know what, to make it worse, they're all kids and they're in wheelchairs. Right? It makes it horrible, right? The logic says, here's where logic and reason have to agree. Logic says, one guy, lots of people, let them die. That's the logical thing to do. Oh, man. That's not the emotional thing to do, though. I don't even like it. I teach this all the time. I can't stand this part. However, is it unreasonable for you to look at those kids who can't defend themselves and say, gee, Ken, I'm sorry. I have to save these kids. Now it's reasonable. Now it's reasonable. See what we just did? We changed our emotions about the situation so that we can take life-saving action. It's not reasonable for Ken to bang on the door knowing that there are kids in wheelchairs there, that this guy coming down the hallway. Maybe it's more reasonable for him to turn and fight or run. See what I mean? It's about them, not about us. That's why we like to do this experiment, because you really see how our emotions can get us killed very quickly or get somebody else killed. I got to open the door. He's my brother. Oh. Now everybody's dead. That is... That's right. Well, you guys can have a seat. Thank you so much for being brave. Sort of like that old joke that's a little bit of certainly doesn't follow biblical lines, but there's a man's brother passes on, and his brother is really upset. Sam, who's left on earth, is very upset. His brother has passed on, and why wouldn't he be? They've been best friends for 50-some years, and it's really a sad situation. He says, Lord, I know that that once they're absent from the body, they're present with the Lord, but if there's a way I would like just to know he's okay. I really believe he's okay, but I need to know it. All of a sudden, the Lord in his grace, which, this is a joke, so don't take it too bad, right? Allows him to hear the voice of his brother. He goes, oh, God, thank you for doing this for me. Thank you for doing this for me. What's heaven like? He goes, it's great. Wow, that's wonderful. And he goes, I've got some good news and some bad news. He goes, what do you mean? You know how we always played baseball as a kid? It's like, yeah, well, I'm on the baseball team and I'm the captain. He goes, well, that's wonderful. What's the bad news? You're pitching Wednesday. Oh. Right? Well, when we when we deal with those types of, right, there's good news and bad news. So here's the good news. The good news is they were very reasonable people. And you heard Ken, he said, that's reasonable. You saw it first, we both found it, it's a reasonable split. So they're very reasonable people. It's all in framing it, good news and bad news. Good news is that we can reframe our emotions to take life-saving action. The bad news is that we have to reframe our emotions to take life-saving action. There are people who can do it without doing this at all. We call them sociopaths, right? They're the people probably shooting at us in some cases. They have devalued us. So another concept we're going to give out to you, and then we're going to take a quick break and we'll move on from this, is something called entitlement rationalization. Yes?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please do.
So you were talking about the gentleman banging on the door and there was something going on, whatever was going on outside, and you didn't want to let him in, and it was reasonable to let him in because you were worried about the people.
It was not reasonable to let them in.
Yeah. So thinking that way, would it be reasonable to think that if he has time to be out there banging on the door, that gentleman isn't close enough to be doing anything to him, so you could open the door quick and let him in?
It depends on what you know. So what he's talking about is situational awareness. What do I know? Very glad you brought this up because this will come up later. But we're going to talk about it now. So here what he's saying, if he's banging on the door, maybe nobody's out there. It would be great if he said, nobody's in the hallway, let me in. That would be great, right? That would be a reasonable communication for Ken to say, buddy, no one's out here, open the door, right? What information do I have? If I heard that it was at the pavilion's out there, right? If I heard it was at the pavilion, then I have time, maybe. I'm taking a risk, but it's a reasonable risk, right? Which is really what you're asking, what's a reasonable risk? If I know nothing, there's a shooter in the church, people have been killed, do you open the door? It's not reasonable to open the door without more information. It's really tough. Maybe he gives us the information and we trust Kenny, and maybe he's afraid because the guy has a gun to him, right? I always hear that one. If pounding on the door, if we don't pound on doors, if that's part of our training, nobody will ever fool you, right? Because you just don't open the door. Or if our training is we just don't open the door, we just don't open the door, right? So it's all based on what you actually know where the incident might be. Incidents like this move fast. From the pavilion to the church, how long would it take a young person to run it? 15 seconds maybe. So by the time we heard about it, that shooter could be right behind them, right? So it's just hard to know. If he's still outside, I've locked the door, well, you have time to let Kenny in. You lock the front doors, he's not in here. Okay, well now, based on the information I have, I'm going to make a reasonable decision. So this is what the media has really done a terrible job to our nation this way. Firefighters, police make reasonable calls all the time based on the information they have. It was reasonable to shoot a guy who, was running down the street with a machete towards a preschool. Probably. I couldn't get there. It was a reasonable thing to do. Well, you should have shot him in the leg. Okay. I should have used my curare dart too, right? I mean, that doesn't really work, right? I mean, there are people who can do stuff like that. I practice a lot. I can't do it. Not at a full somebody running. I've never gone deer hunting and said, let me get him in the back leg, right? Because, right, yeah, I know, it's ridiculous, right? It's a lethal situation, and you have other people. That's a reasonable thing to do. Not reasonable, punch a guy over a seat in a church, or shoot a guy over getting punched in a church over a seat when you're not even knocked out or scarred. It's not a reasonable response. Reasonable response might be to tie the person up physically and remove them. That's reasonable. So it is situational to a degree. It's based on what you know and believe at the time. That's why they say reasonable belief. So that's true of all violent situations. That's the hard part. What do I know? And that's why ahead of time we got to have the emotion and we got to reframe the reasoning so we're making good decisions. Otherwise, our emotions, our desire to help people. It's just why we don't talk to shooters. We don't try to talk them down, right? That's what the slide was supposed to say. Maybe it did say it and I read it wrong. But I'll talk them down. Chances are you won't. People believe they can. Well, I know them. I'll give you an example. I go to pick up a person and a lady comes out. She's like, you can't pick him up. I know him. He's a good kid. I was like, did you know he just raped his sister? I thought he was a good kid. Well, he comes from a good family. Yeah, well, why am I here? Why do I have a warrant? So out of the way, right? And that sounds mean, but, right? That's a reasonable response. You know why we respond that way sometimes to people in law enforcement? If anyone's a cop in here, they probably know why. So if you're a cop, don't answer. Let the secret lay for a second. Because sometimes we have to shock people into getting out of the way. Because situations are fluid. Other times, politeness and courtesy is a rule of the day. It really does depend, and there's an art to it. You can certainly, I try to be polite all the time, but in that situation, I needed to get the school teacher out of the way. The students were forming up, and she's like, I can talk to them. We ended up putting her in the back of the car. Not because we were mad at her, because she was starting to radicalize on behalf of the student. That becomes a real problem at a school, as you could imagine. So, that being said, entitlement rationalization is this. You ever go past one of these police brakes or emergency brakes on the highway and you're late for work and you turn around, say, well, it's an emergency, I'm late for work, right? That's not legal for you to do that, but that's entitlement rationalization. I have an emergency, therefore it's okay for me to do something. Shooters do this all the time. In another course, we call it the murder factory. They do this all the time. Something went wrong. I was treated bad at one church when I was little, therefore I have to justify, I being a superhero, am now going to right the wrongs and take out this church. I'm a victim or I'm a hero, or a combination. I'm a victim and a hero. You'll hear that sometimes. Teenagers use it all the time. Well, I had to stay out late because all my friends are staying out late. No, you didn't have to. It wasn't actually a life and death necessity. So there's a story where a guy's being interviewed in a homicide, and he says, I had to kill my wife. She'd find out I was cheating on her, and I'm a nice guy. I know. Like, you hear it, you're like, what? Did he just say that? Right? Well, I didn't want her to be hurt. Well, then you shouldn't have cheated. We have this thing called a divorce. We could have gone to counseling. Murder was not a reasonable option, but it's entitlement rationalization. I'm entitled because I have some special privilege, because I'm a special person, special circumstances, all that type of stuff. In law enforcement, there are such things as indigent circumstances or emergent circumstances. Somebody comes through here and starts shooting at us and we shoot him. That is not entitlement rationalization. That is a normal response to a violent situation. Entitlement rationalization is where I talk myself into doing something that is clearly sinful, evil, and wrong, and I'm trying to make an excuse for myself. People do it all the time. Pastor doesn't understand how my wife treats me, so I yelled at her and hit her, which, I met my wife in the martial arts. I wouldn't do that. So it would be bad, right? So everybody understand entitlement rationalization? Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break, let everyone use the restroom, and we'll get right back into the rest of the course. Well, I think we'll get back to the program. I love to see the fellowship. So I was asked to use the handheld so that you guys can hear me better. Hopefully this is working better. Well, I can start over if you missed anything. Just kidding. Somebody during the break asked me about my background. I kind of just gave us a company overview. I will be very brief because I think it could be important to you to know. I've been in the security industry, public safety industry for over 30 years. I've worked on anti-terrorism programs. I've been in law enforcement. I've been in emergency management. I've responded to real-world emergencies, just like I talked to about our team and leadership. And I am the CEO and president of Standing Stone. We have 437 employees, and we work coast to coast on different projects for schools, governments, police departments, and the military. We also work for a lot of major universities as well. So that kind of sums it up. I'm also a combative practitioner. I've been doing that for 40 years, since I was little, and I am the head instructor of Crucial Point Combatives in Huntington. So that's me. So other than that, I can't think of anything else to tell you. I have a degree, I have a bachelor's degree in theology, and I have my PhD in organizational leadership. So I think that's everything. All right, so that being said, yes. Ian Thompson.